peace. The cosmic egg still cracks, Phaene's light still breaks through every human heart when consciousness awakes. It's the Agora Hour, sacred time to gather, where wisdom flows like water and all streams flow together. From many into one, from one into many. The game that spins the worlds, the dance that changes plenty into infinite possibility. 6 days, 6 kings, one spiral spinning high. From formless void to formed reality we fly. Through Nyx's starlit wisdom to Gaia's fertile ground. Through Kronos' measured motion to Zeus's lightning crown. To Dionysus' ecstasy, where spirit meets the flesh. Where ancient tales get broken and woven fresh. Let the markets fill with voices, let the temples ring with song. Where merchant meets philosopher and weakness becomes strong. In the space between our differences, truth unfolds its wings. In the clash of honest questions, new understanding springs. Genesis speaks Hebrew, while Orpheus sings in Greek. But under different tongues, the same mysteries speak. Of light emerging from the void, through sacred sound. Of waters parting high and low, of holy ground. Rising from the deep, of stars that mark the time. Of creatures born of earth, and clay sublime. It's the Agora Hour, sacred time to gather. Where wisdom flows like water, and all streams flow together. From many into one, from one into many. The game that spins the worlds, the dance that changes plenty into infinite possibility. So bring your truth to market, lay your wisdom bare. In the space between our stories, sacred moments flare. Where Phanes meets Elohim, where Tiamat greets Eve. In the garden of our gathering, new worlds we conceive. It's the Agora Hour, time to play our part in the cosmic game of many, flowing back to start. Remember, the mysteries aren't lost, they're living in the spaces where we gather. In the questions we're giving to each other in trust. In the sacred now, when we remember how to wonder. Remember how to see through different eyes, the same eternal light that dances through all stories, making all paths bright.
Alright guys, let's get started. Let me see if anybody has any comments about the volume today. I have throttled up that connection, so hopefully I'm louder than before. Just let me know if you can hear me or if I need to adjust. Anyways, today we are going to do a little open forum. A little bit about discourse, about how we talk to each other in the modern world. I wanted to get to this to talk a little bit about like what this channel's about, what I've been trying to build here, and what you can expect on other content on this channel. But I'm going to give it a chance to have a few more people join us before we get started. If anybody has questions, let me know. This is experimental, so flying by the seat of my pants here. I don't anticipate this to be as popular as some of the others have been, because it's a new idea, new kind of show, so we will be taking it slow today. All right. Well, I guess I'll just ramble for the time being. If that's how we want to get this started, we'll have to allow things to develop as they need to. So what is this? What is the Agora Hour? I wanted to provide an opportunity for viewers on this channel to have an open forum where you could come to me once a week with questions, whether it's regarding the specific video content from that week, whether it's something that's just kind of been percolating in your own mind in regards to any of the topics of myth, magic, and mysticism. And this is that open forum. So in a kind of just classic question and answer format, I'm here. We could almost call it office hours, if you will. Office hours for the On the Mysteries channel, for you to pick my brain about a specific topic, and just also allows me a space to ramble a little bit, particularly if we have nobody viewing. If there's no live viewing populace, I'll just ramble. I guess that's what I'll do. Got to find my stride somehow here. What I prepared for today, in general, was to talk about the idea of discourse in general, and also to provide an invitation to my personal Discord server. It's called Discourse. Imagine that. And what my vision is for something of that nature is to rehabilitate online discussion, rehabilitate people's ability to speak to each other online, rather than the classic and ever-present debate format where people lack not only respect but inclusivity. They don't embrace diverse perspectives. And so one of the projects that I'm going to hawk in this Q&A format is the Discourse Discord server. Like I said, rehabilitation of online discussion. Helping people to practice active listening and participate actively in discussion rather than destructively. So I will link that in the video description, and I will also put it in the chat eventually here. But I want to kind of just wax poetically about that. We are suffering from a dramatic lack of perspective in the modern world. It's something that is reducing our critical faculty to a point of no return. We're getting close to that, in my estimation. We're getting close to the complete breakdown of societal functioning, thanks to things like social media, maybe even this platform as well. And so reaching out and giving people a space where they can relearn the critical faculty of discourse, I think is very important to what we are hoping to get at in this world. Beyond that, I do want to talk a little bit about what the Agora was in ancient Greece. The Agora was the place, the common place for everyone. It was the place where the market happened. It was the place where people joined in a public forum. It was the place where ideas were shared between folks, and that is severely lacking. The internet has become our Agora. The internet has become that in a sense, but the anonymity and the veiling of the internet has prevented us from really accessing the community. We have community online, but it's so veiled that it's disturbing at times. People can be whoever they want to be in anonymity. So, some of the things I wanted to talk about today are like, since I kind of fashioned this about ancient wisdom and how to practice ancient wisdom, philosophy, magic, mysticism in 2025, I wanted to go over some kind of like rules of engagement that I have in my own practice that have been really helpful for me as I have navigated the better part of the last 2 decades navigating some of these topics. The first one is perception. Everything is perception, but we have suffered in recent memory, at least in the last 10 years, I've seen it dramatically decline. The idea that it's almost, there's two. There is this idea of everybody's perspective has to matter, kind of like a hyper individualism, and everyone has to respect every perspective. And then there is the idea that there is a potential like universal or objective perspective, and I think that's probably birthed from scientific positivism in general. But I won't necessarily go there. What the core of this first rule of engagement is that everybody has a perspective, and there's value in those perspectives. We don't have to accept them wholesale, but we do need to consider them, especially in times where they come into direct conflict with our own perceptions, our own worldviews. Our worldview needs to be fluid, particularly if we're going to engage in any of this modern discourse around myth, magic, or mysticism. We have to have a fluid, non rigid paradigm and worldview in order for us to survive any of this if we're going through it. I got a question already here. Permission to ask. Yes, this is Q&A, so please do. Is the truth that we think is true really true? What happens if the truth we think is true is not actually true? So what is the real truth? Well, that's a mouthful and a half. Just to answer the first part of it, is the truth that we think is true really true? Truth is really interesting to me because truth is always true. I think we conflate facts and truth. Truth is derived, at least from my perspective, from the meaning that we give a certain perspective. For instance, if I say to you, I had this experience, I believe it to be true. That doesn't mean that it's factual, correct? It means that from my perspective, from the meaning that I've derived from that experience, it is true to me. Now, truth is fluid in that regard, much like our perception. Our perception has to be capable of shifting, particularly if we're going to navigate, again, myth, magic, or mysticism in any way, shape, or form. We have to be willing to shift our perspective to another angle in order to get at what the truth may be, because our perception is always going to be limited. Our perception is always going to be limited. So considering shifting into somebody else's perspective gives us more data with which to make better decisions. And so to kind of like get around your question there, Quidtra, what happens if the truth we think is true is not actually true? Then we need to reconsider. When data changes, we have to reevaluate. Test the structural integrity of our perspective, of our worldview, and then from that point, what does that new data then inform us about? What then can we be? What then can we consider as new information that helps expand our view of what truth is or what the world is? And so, the real truth is always fluid. It's never objective and rigid. Truth is always going to flow wherever perception is. Now, the trick is, I think, and going back to what I was talking about, the first rule of engagement is understanding our perspective and our perception. If we can increase the band of awareness in that perception, in that perspective, then we gain more access to truth rather than sitting there with a very limited perspective. Truth is going to only kind of come to us in a narrow band. But we can't ever consider everyone's perspective. I don't think that the human mind is capable of doing that. And it kind of ruins the interplay of the game. Okay. And so, interesting question. Thank you. Thank you for bringing that. That's what I'm talking about. This is what the Agora Hour is about. Bring me something like that, twist my mind and see if you can get me. See if you can get me. I would love that. Going back to this idea of perception though, since I still have some talking points, what we often find in these truths is we come to a path, a fork in the road, and that's usually paradox. And what paradox forces us to do in these instances is it forces us to transcend our rational perspective and consider things outside of what we normally are accepting as part of our worldview. Worldview is very interesting. Everyone has one. It's informed by the beliefs, the experiences that we've had in our life, and it grows or shrinks depending upon how active we're being in building that worldview. And so often what we come to is a point of paradox where we are kind of presented with a situation that doesn't make any sense to the rational mind. It's a stopping point. It makes us feel like we have to choose, or it breaks our brain. It breaks us to the point where we say, this isn't making sense. And that's usually a point where intuition, where spiritual experience can happen, is when the rational mind finds no way around it anymore, and you're forced to live with the reality of with reality itself. Paradox almost unveils reality. It's apocalyptic in that nature. And so I think that's one of the advantages that antiquity have over us in this technological age, where we have this godlike technology, medieval institutions, and Paleolithic brains. The antiquity had what I like to call mythopoetic consciousness, and they were able to meet those paradoxes with the idea that things don't have to be hyper rational, things don't have to be factual. Sometimes meaning is derived from story, and that story is just as powerful, if not more potent, than the quote unquote objective hard facts. And when we approach the world as though we are not going to conquer it through reductive rationalism, if we try to participate with the world in sacred play, then things go a lot better for us. They really do. When we approach this thing as a dance or as play, if we approach it as a giant cosmic drama, then we actively participate rather than approaching it from this view of separation, where it is an external thing meant to be conquered, meant to be viewed in a specific way or reduced to its smallest elements. That I think that has ceased to be true for many people, and I think beyond that, it bores people. So I think ultimately, to navigate what ancient wisdom traditions mean in the modern age, and what it means to meet modern challenges with ancient wisdom, the word I have is play, sacred play. We have to meet it with a playful heart. Get at me with questions if you have any questions about what I'm droning on about, or if you have anything else related to the channel and previous videos, or even the new video coming out tomorrow about Chronos. Second rule of engagement in public discourse. Beyond perception, the nature of our own will. Oh, I got another question. Quidtra. So that means truth depends on your point of view or something? I'm satisfied with your answer in the question. Actually, this is a philosophical question. I think, yes, Obi-Wan said it very well. The truths that we cling to depend greatly on our own point of view. He says that in Return of the Jedi. I hope everybody knows that, but not everybody's a Star Wars nerd. So, but yeah, our perspective, our truth is always dependent on our point of view. And that point of view can be narrow or it can be broad. It's up to you and what you want to do with your time here. But it draws us back to the nature of will and divine alignment. So these 10 pieces that I've brought today are like my 10 rules of engagement in magic, in myth, in personal development, within the guise of mysticism and magic. So the first thing is understand that everything is perception. The second is, how do we direct and align ourselves with divine will? A lot of magical paradigms operate on the idea of will, like Thelema, first and foremost, has kind of brought this idea of will to the forefront in magical and mystical discourse. And we kind of have the idea of will and willpower in normal society as it is. But this is a different kind of will. I like to call it will with a capital W rather than just your will. I will myself to do a lot of things throughout the day outside of the autonomic kind of functions that everybody goes through in their basic day. But there is the things that I will into the universe through my own force. And then there is the nature of divine will. And divine will, as it is, at least posited in magical paradigms, is a will that is present before our incarnation, if you will. It is a will that is, for lack of a better term, aligned with our own cosmic goals, things that we don't feel privy to from our own perspective, our limited perspective of being an incarnated human. And the divine will, if you will, is something that comes from God or from the divine, if that's a better term for you, or from the universe. It is something that is not necessarily predestined, but it is like the best possible path for you. And for me, this manifests in a couple of ways, and I like to think of it as you're walking down. I'm going to quote like Robert Frost here. You know, two roads diverged in a snowy wood, and I took the road less traveled. Well, the typical road that most people, I think, travel in life are the basic road, the road that we think everybody wants us to go on, the road that, if you're in the United States of America, it's the 2-car garage, the 2 kids, the buy the house, the good career, so on and so forth. That's the pre-programmed will. Well, each one of us has a will that's beyond that, something that is unique to our experience, unique to our incarnation, unique to the goals set for us. And when we walk in alignment with that, the path less taken, as Robert Frost would have said, it takes a lot of courage, first of all, to go down that untrodden path, because we don't know. That is the path that we can't calculate. That is the path that when we take it, we are unaware of what the end of it looks like. Versus the other path, the well-trodden path, we can kind of calculate. We can kind of say, look, I know what this path is about. I know where I'm going to end up, and that is pleasing to me, or it feels safe and secure. There's not a lot of safety and security in the divine path, right? We don't know what's going to happen. But what I have found very interesting about this, as it relates to what we were talking about before with perception, when we are living on a well-trodden path, a path of our own forced will versus following our path of divine alignment, we experience suffering. And that suffering is the kind of like, let's call it the cellular notification. It's the pop notification that you are not walking on the divine aligned path. You are on the non-well-trodden path, or you're on the well-trodden path. You need to go down this path. And so for me, that suffering, when that pops up into our field of perception, it's a notification saying, redirect, come back over here, come back to the path of ease, the path of the one that's meant for you, right? But that doesn't come easy, right? We have to cultivate discernment in order for that to occur. And as that relates to everything within magical practice, mysticism, these sorts of things, that's why I think philosophy is so important. I think in most magical practice these days, it seems like most people will grab a book, whether that's any particular tradition. They will then lock themselves into that book and only do what's in that book, right? Whether it's a set of rituals, whether it's a set of spells, they generate a worldview, a perception of reality based on that tradition, and that's where they sit, and that's where they stay. There's more often than not, outside of, if you're working in something like Neoplatonic theurgy, there's a ton of philosophy behind it. That's what you kind of have to steep yourself in philosophy. Golden Dawn, which I've operated in as well, does have some of that as well. But I don't see a lot of people digging into the philosophical aspects with it. And I think that in order for us to cultivate discernment for these points in magical practice and mystical practice, we have to have a healthy dose of the love of wisdom, of philosophy, no matter how you get that. So I think that's another key point that we need to understand, as well as surrendering to the spiritual development. It's not a nice, neat path. It's not a nice, neat path for us. There's a lot of challenges that arise in this path, and they will throw you for a loop. And so if you don't cultivate the discernment in order to meet those with the best possible reason and rationality, then you could be in trouble real quick. All right, more questions. Actually, belief in God is something that is private. However, people who believe in God's condition have a directed way of life because the norms in the Bible or Quran or various other books. This all of book teach something that is good for life. It could be said to be a guide. Yeah, I can get down with that. I can get down with that. First of all, belief in God or the divine absolutely has to be private. It does. When we take it outside of that sphere and we put it in a public performative viewpoint, it becomes something that's no longer in integrity. When you have performative spirituality, is you kind of miss the point, in my opinion. But the norms within some of these sacred texts are good from an exoteric perspective. Now, more often than not, what we talk about on this channel is esoteric, the hidden perspective. These are the things that we do behind closed doors, not necessarily, again, performative. It's not for us to do, ritual on screen on the internet. So that's a good point, though. The sacred texts and the ones that I've dived into on this channel in general are great roadmaps, but that's all they are, is a map. You can't mistake the map for the territory, right? You can't look at the map and say this is the same thing as the land that it's reflecting. The map is the symbol, and the world is still out there, and you still have to go explore it. And that's the case with any of these systems, any of these sacred texts. You got to do the work. You got to go do the thing. You got to go explore, get your hands dirty, or all of it is just really mental gymnastics. I'll use a nicer term than I'm used to. But when we surrender to that, and we allow that spiritual development to come naturally, organically, then we are, what's the word? We are actively living in that divine alignment. It isn't an act of surrender at that time. And if you're just joining us, if you guys are just popping in, this is Q&A format. Just ask questions, get at me, whether it's about the nature of the channel, the nature of ancient wisdom in the modern world, myth, magic, mysticism, recent video. Just ask questions. Otherwise, I just ramble. I'm still trying to figure out what this format's going to look like for us here on the channel, but I wanted to have a Q&A format weekly so you guys can come on, build community, talk, ask questions, and build the critical faculties of good discourse between people. And so I've got one here who's asking me a bunch of questions. I see 6 other people viewing right now. Please ask. So that I don't have to ramble, because rambling can get very boring for a lot of people, and we know that YouTube doesn't like boring. They don't like people clicking off, and they will ping me for it if you click off. So it is on you to ask me questions. I was kind of going over some rules of magical engagement or mystical engagement. Most of what the channel talks about so far that's been popular has been the mythology of things, and I think that's a great gateway, right? And it kind of dovetails into what I wanted to talk about next, which is symbols. Now, mythology, the sacred texts that we talk about often, are symbols to what is in the reality that we live in, right? We talk about Zeus. We talk about Kronos. Kronos will be the video tomorrow. Kronos is a symbol for something in our own life, something that we need to be doing in our own life. It's not some pie in the sky thing. It's not some external separate thing. It is a marker on a map that says, turn left here, do this thing, right? Go down into this valley, so on and so forth. The point of mythology is it is a symbol to a gateway of power for us, and these stories have sacred meaning because they speak to our soul. They speak to us as individuals, and they should relate in some way to what's going on in our life. You come across a story from mythology, pick a tradition, it doesn't matter, and it really resonates with you, there is a reason for that. That resonation means that somewhere within you, that story is currently in play. That story is currently playing out in your life. go, oh, wow, that story is really interesting. It's more often than not, and has been the case in my experience, that the reason for that is that it's currently playing out in your life. You just can't see it. You're not seeing it that way more often than not because mythology is very fantastical. It's very out there. And we don't see our own life that way. We see our own lives as kind of this humdrum kind of thing where yeah, it's just me, just little old me. We've kind of been programmed that way. But make no mistake, your life is just as fantastic and incredible and beautiful as the stories that we share on this channel. And so I like to think of mythology as the gateway to the next stages of things, and that is magical or mystical practice in your life. The mythology informs what we should do in a ritual or spiritual setting. I kind of would equate magic to the ritual side of things and mysticism more to intense spiritual exploration, if I was going to kind of categorize it like that. And so mythology is that gateway. It says, here's the thing that is within you that you need to address. Well, then magic and mysticism, I think, are the ways that you address that. These are the other maps that we pick up. It's almost like mythology is the map, and we're walking around, oh, that's what I need to focus on. I need to go over here. Well, at that location, there's another map. And that map is a set of ritual descriptions. Go ahead and do this, say this words, do this fancy gesture, burn this particular incense, bing, bang, boom, Bob's your uncle, and you've got a new experience. That new experience should then inform your reality, your truth, as Quitra was bringing up. And from that point, I think, from that point, then we have those big transformational experiences that the mystics talk about. So if mythology is the symbol and the gateway to power, it's a living thing, right? These are not stories of the past. These are stories that are still relevant today. They're still relevant in our own lives. And I think that in them contain the answers to any of the problems that we are facing on a personal level. Some of them may be on a societal level. Quitra says, speaking of mythology, I'm interested in how the Egyptians built the pyramids. Is it an unsolved mystery? Yeah, I would say so. Everybody has a theory on it. Whether it's aliens or giants or sonic instruments that lifted the rocks or magical sounds. I've heard that one where people had magical words that lifted sound or lifted the blocks with sound. There's the idea that there's slave labor that built them. There's the idea that they were paid laborers. There's the idea that they were foreigners, kind of contracted to come in and build the things. I think it was different per builder. So the thing that I think a lot of people don't understand is it's not like they just started building all the pyramids at once. They were built across time, and each king, each pharaoh, built a pyramid as a devotional practice, or as a lot of people think it's a tomb-related thing, and I think that's part of it, but I think it's grossly underestimating what the pyramids were supposed to symbolize. But yeah, I guess I could do an entire Agora hour on that topic alone, Quidra. So thanks for bringing that up. How they built the pyramids, I think is an interesting question, but more important is what they still stand for today. I mean, we look at these things from afar even. I've never been. I'd love to go. Maybe someday, if the channel keeps doing well, I'll go and I'll take you guys with me. But even from afar, we look at those things and we say, what possessed someone to build something that would last this long? What could have possibly possessed someone to do something like that? I mean, and the fact that they've survived all of the scraping and the theft to this day. I mean, they used to be smooth, theoretically, right? There are some pictures before some of the defacing that's happened in the last few hundred years, but it's an incredible thing to posit, to question. So thank you for that one. Anybody else? Any other questions? Tomorrow we are going to have the Chronos video, which is the next piece of the Orphic Rhapsodic Theogony, and my comparison to them and the Genesis. And so that is coming tomorrow. Just a heads up. Thanks, Quitra. I appreciate all the questions. I see you. I see you knew the assignment. Well, we've got about 35 minutes into this thing. I'm going to have to tease more about this, I'm thinking. I'm going to in the marketing of this particular show. Because I'm feeling a little underperformative or prepared to just ramble for an hour. But I do think that there are some really interesting opportunities for us as people living in a world that is tenuous at best, looking back at the ancient world and seeing what wisdom is still valid for us today. I think there's just a dearth of knowledge available to us and wisdom available to us that can help see us through some of this. But we have to be willing to do things with that. Except that we probably don't know as much as we think we do in the modern age. And two, beyond that, be willing to explore these things through a modern lens and not be so stuck on this like archaeological precision. A lot of us are interested in like reconstruction or trying to recapture what was going on in antiquity with magical practice or even mystical practice, trying to get it right, or obsession with the point of origin. And so I in particular think that we, I think I might have lost connection. Oops. Nope. We're still good. We're still good. Where was I? Right. Origin and the obsession with origin. If we're going to be reconstructing any of these things for personal practice in the modern age, we have to be willing to take a leap of faith. Gather all the evidence that you can, read all the things that you can about these things, and then put it to work. Go to work with it immediately. Don't wait around for the right book. Start doing the things. Start a meditation practice. Start trying out some of the rituals you see. Try out some of the spells that you see in some of these books. Get your hands dirty. It's the only way to recapture it. I just wrote a piece and put it out today on Substack about how these things are always available to us. One of the traditions I focused on early on in this journey was Druidry, specifically the order of bards, ovates, and druids, Obad. And one of the things that struck me in the studies there was this belief that although some of these things are lost, they're never lost forever. There's always a way to recapture them. And the piece that I was working on and wrote on Substack was about how it's all available to us in every single thing. You know, Proclus says all things are in all things to different admixtures, to different settings, right? Different percentages. And so if within a drop of water is contained the entire ocean, I don't understand why we shy away from trying to get it so archaeologically precise when we are reconstructing these traditions. There is a certain degree of respect that I think we do need to have. Do our best, absolutely, in everything that we try to do when we're reconstructing these things from an ancient perspective and trying to bring them into a modern perspective. Respecting cultural boundaries, respecting that we don't have all the information. But that should not stop us from trying our darndest to reconstruct them as best we can and bring them forward. These are, if we try to crystallize them as they were in antiquity, they no longer function for us here. And so in the modern day, it's so vital, I think, for us to use them as a living like bridge, if you will, to bring them forward with us, and bolt on the newest DLC that there is with modern consciousness. We have all this wealth of knowledge from the scientific world. How does that apply itself to these ancient traditions of wisdom? When we're going through a certain tradition, pick one. How does our current set of information then change our perspective, our worldview, when we bring those two in conflict? Those sorts of things should never be like separated, as much as we should find ways to integrate them so that we have a better chance at achieving what the aim is. The aim is, of course, living a better life, living a life that feels good. We're not meant to suffer while we're here. That's a product of our choices. That's a product of the circumstances that we find ourselves in, but there's always a way out. And that's one of the things that magical or mystical practice teaches us, I think, is how to enjoy this sacred dance, this cosmic drama, more with more love, just more muchier. Hi, sir. I think I'm kind of an omnist. It makes omnist-ish, like omnist-ish, makes rituals hard and kind of all over the place. I just do whatever I'm inclined to do and try to find ways to marry them together. I think that's beautiful. I used to refer to myself as a big old bowl of omnist soup because I'm really eclectic that way. There are so many different traditions to study. It's like, how do you pick one, right? Well, unless you want to become an expert in one, I don't see the real necessary point on a spiritual or personal level to narrow your focus into just one, unless you really want to go deep. But it can be very difficult, as you say, to try and marry these things. Like, how do I take something from this tradition over here and mix it with this when they seem so different? Well, I think you had the answer right in your question. You just do what you're inclined to. Flow. Let yourself kind of get into it. One of the things that when I first got started in any of these magical or mystical practices was I felt goofy. I felt silly. Like, I'm doing all these weird gestures. I'm saying all these words that I know I'm mispronouncing. Am I doing it wrong? And there was no trust. There was no play in it. And you have to play. You have to play. You have to be willing to fail, to make a mistake, to do it over again, and then enjoy it while you're doing it, right? If you don't enjoy doing any of this stuff, don't do it. Or find a way to enjoy it. There's really this a lot of these technologies. That's what I'll refer very much transformational, very much detrimental if you're not doing it in the right context or with the right mentorship. And so if you're not having fun while doing it, then it's probably time to address why you're doing it in general, right? Why is it that you're doing any of this if you're not enjoying it? Does that make sense? I appreciate the comment, and as someone who is eclectic and believes that there's truth in all of them, I understand how difficult that can be. So thank you for sharing. Another person who understood the assignment. Come to the live stream, ask the questions if you have any. We're, broadband topic today is just ancient wisdom and modern practice. How do we do that? How do we bring what's from the past here to the future? How do we do that with respect? How do we do that in the best way possible for ourselves? Anybody else got a question for me? Or if not, I'll just have to ramble again. You guys don't really want me rambling for an entire hour, do you? If that's the case, I might have to rethink this whole question and answer format. One of the things that I think kind of plays into the omnist perspective, the modern perspective really is omnist. The idea of globalization in general, the whole world being connected the way that it is with this, you watching this from wherever you're watching, it kind of lends itself to that omnist perspective. So I think that's really interesting. But beyond that, you said you had to do what you were inclined to do. which I really like that. I like that a lot because it means you're tapping into the voice inside instead of the many voices that we have running in our rational brain all the time. And one of the things that's been most effective for me along those lines is getting real primal with it. And what I mean by primal is like stripping away all of the cultural like accretions that are in my mental sphere. You know, the things that I've collected, whether it's from parents, peers, society, school, dropping all of that as much as I possibly can in order to get to what my body, what my being wants to be involved in. So for me, like I really love drumming. Drumming is great for this kind of thing. It roots us in that intuitive nature, and then allows us to kind of flow rather than trying to think our way through this. Because more often than not, I find that the thinking is usually the cause of our suffering. It's the overthinking of things. So I really like that perspective. Thank you for sharing that. The idea of omnism anyways is a return to unity when we have been so hyper polarized over the last few thousand years, as things kind of just go into what I like to call now the cult of the individual. It's me, my, this, that, and the other. So I think omnism is a nice portal to where we need to go in general. If you're just joining us here, we've got about 15 more minutes on this Agora Hour question and answer format. If you have a question at all about what we talk about, myth, magic, mysticism, or a specific video, or something you've seen on the channel, or just, whatever, pick my brain. That's what I'm here for. A whole goal of this channel is to kind of build community, not just to have me talking at you, but really engaging with each other as well. Yeah. Omnism is a series of collections of and cultures. I think so. It's like the mountain metaphor. Everybody's climbing the same mountain from different sides, and a mountain has a different look on this side. On the north side, it's going to have this. On the south side, it's going to have that, and so on and so forth. Nobody's wrong. Another great parable for that is the parable of the blind man and the elephant. Elephant comes into town. 3 blind men see the elephant. The first one grabs the trunk and says, "Oh, I see what the elephant is like. It's long, and it's bendy. It's like a snake." And the second blind man touches the side of the elephant, and he says, "No, you're wrong. It's like a wall." He's touching the side of the elephant. It's firm. It's strong. It's big. It's wide. And then the third man says, "No, you're both wrong." And he grabs one of the legs and he goes, "It's like a tree. It's like the trunk of a tree." And of course, the meaning of the parable is that none of the 3 are wrong. They just have incomplete information. And so going back to the idea that I was talking about at the beginning of our perspective, our perception of things, truth is going to be what we experience for us. And so just like you're talking about the mountain from different sides, just like the blind man and the elephant, nobody's wrong. It's just that their perception and perspective is completely different, or seems completely different than yours. Oh, Quitro, you're back. He says, freedom. This is an interesting thing. The freedom espoused by philosophers such as Nietzsche and Ibn Arabi is the freedom to think, to do anything without interference or barriers. Oof, what do I think freedom is about? That's a good question. That's a really good question. What do I think freedom is about? I think you've got a piece of it there. The ability to think or do anything without interference from others, perhaps, right? Freedom is, man, you brought me 2 like really ineffable questions. Just what is truth and what is freedom? Because if we have no self-imposed boundaries, if we are just running roughshod over other people, there is a sure, we are free, but that comes into conflict with other people's freedoms. And so you have a delicate dance of not interrupting somebody else's freedom at the same time as exercising your right of freedom. And so that takes the art of discernment more than anything. You have to have the ability to look at my actions and how they impact others. No Turn on Stone says, could freedom be the absence of oppression? Yeah. Oppression by self or oppression by others, right? It could be either one of those things. I think it's going to be different for everybody. Certain people perceive a certain experience as being free, and others might perceive that experience as not free. And so I don't know if there's an objective way for us to really look at freedom, because it's going to look so different for different people. And perhaps that could be a limited perspective on it, but I don't know how you would define it for everyone. My question to you is what do you think about Nietzsche's perspective? That it is the ability to think and do anything without interference. Because if you're utilizing freedom and that infringes upon somebody else's ability to utilize their freedom, does it cease to be freedom? Does it cease to be freedom, and does your freedom now turn to oppression? Like, there's a delicate balance there that you have to be aware of. Is that you can't, and this is why we have society and civilization, why we have laws and justice and truth of these natures, is because we can't all be doing what we want to do all the time. That's not, usually unchained freedom leads to chaos, which isn't always bad, right? Chaos isn't always bad. It's usually that cauldron of which new order then arises from. And so when freedom goes and becomes oppressive, it usually breeds a higher order of freedom. And that may be something that we're experiencing today in this world, is the use of the term freedom to oppress others in any way, shape, or form is, and this is one of the things we'll talk about in the Chronos video and in the live stream on Friday, is usually from the seeds of that oppression is the one who will rise against and usurp that particular oppressor. And so if someone is using the term of freedom to oppress others, it's within that act alone that they are breeding. It's kind of like if you're into comic books, the bad guy almost always comes into contact with the good guy at some point, and the good guy ends up generating the bad guy through some decision. You see it where they disregard the bad guy. The bad guy gets upset about it, and then the bad guy comes up with the master plan to show the good guy how bad he is. That's kind of what I'm talking about here. The act itself generates its antithesis in that moment, and then eventually that reckoning does have to occur. There's a metaphysical dynamic there that has to happen in order for things to stay in balance. And so that's a long-winded way of answering your question, but I hope it helped. If you're joining us, Q&A format. We got about 7-8 more minutes we're testing out this new format. I just wanted to see if this was something valuable to people on the channel, if they cared to join me in this kind of open discourse. No One Turns Stone says, can freedom and order not coexist? Maybe not for long. Yeah, I'm thinking the guy in The Incredibles. Yeah, see, you know what I'm talking about. But yes, freedom and order do coexist more often than not. I turned on music. Freedom and order have to coexist, right? The freedoms that we experience, our freedoms in society, they exist because order is applied on chaos, right? We generate order. We are order-making creatures, if that makes sense to you. We're part order-making and we're part chaotic. They're kind of twofold that way. Not necessarily dualistic, but it's more of like an Ouroboros, the snake eating its tail. I don't know why I can't spit that out today, but in that same spiral of creation, we generate chaos, and in that chaos we dissolve the previous structure of order, and from that dissolution of the previous structure comes a newer, higher form of order. And each time we do that cycle, each time we complete that cycle, we generate more freedom. Yep, cycles, always cycles within cycles. That's what the myths tell us anyway. And I think that's what our experience tells us too. It's why we revisit so many of the topics or the experiences that we have, is that we didn't learn the lesson the first time, at least not well enough. And you see it in biology too. It's just cycles and cycles and cycles. Slowly over time, the big long march of time, we slowly get things right or adapt to what we need to. And that just takes reps. It's just reps. Cycles and reps. I don't know. Sometimes finding what freedom it is more difficult than looking for a needle in a bush. Yeah, that's why I said you brought me some good questions with that today. Really stretching the philosophical. I appreciate that. Freedom could mean something different day to day, you know? Freedom today is not the same as freedom tomorrow. Like some days I'd like the freedom to just lay the hammer down and get some work done, and then other days freedom looks like I don't want to do this and I'd rather do something else. So freedom is fluid. There's not an objective rigid structure for what it is. I think if you try to apply something like that to it, then you're challenging the nature of what freedom is. And I think that's when maybe we get oppressive over freedom itself. If you're just joining us, this is a Q&A format called the Agora Hour. We're just chopping it up. So get at me with questions, whether it's about myth, magic, mysticism. Otherwise, I'll ramble, and we don't want that. Oh man, I'm gonna need more coffee here soon. Excuse me. I would like the freedom to take a nap now. If that makes any sense. I wonder if there's any other talking points here. Ooh, no. I think I put on here, like, how do we address magic in a digital age? Magic or mysticism in a digital age? There's so much information out there now, and along with that information, misinformation, really, really bad information cycling through communities. And my best answer for that, one of the questions I put in the description for this was like, how do we navigate that? And for me, it's books. If you don't read, if you don't have books, and you're not regularly addressing what people have been saying in books for, the better part of a few thousand years, then you're seriously doing yourself a disservice. It becomes very difficult to piece together a functional practice if you're relying on video content, or if you're relying on the latest TikTok, or somebody's blog. I think that those are great things. They're awesome, but they're just like trying to build a house with just a hammer and no nails. It's like trying to carve a sculpture with a butter knife. It's not functional. So you have to have an affinity for philosophy. You have to have a love of wisdom, and so much of humanity's wisdom has been put down in paper books. So you hear me reference so many books. Well, I do have a love of books. If you guys could see behind this setup, what I have is my primary library, and then I have another library downstairs. But this is where I keep most of my love of my life, which is just the accumulation of dead tree bones with weird black markings all over the dead tree bones. But that is the love of my life, are books. So, oh, thanks, Quitra. I appreciate the subscription. Thank you. hopefully you'll join us tomorrow night. 7:30, we'll be doing the premiere of Kronos and the day that the sky bled. It's the what was it? Phanes Nix Oranos Gaia, fifth installment of the Orphic Rhapsodic Theogonies. And then on Friday, we are doing another live stream about Kronos. So what I do often is one big video per week, and then a live stream deep dive on that. And now adding this Q&A. So if you want to join me next week, I'll be here again. But for now, this has been Agora Hour. Now where's our outro music? Thank you very much, guys. I appreciate it.
In the silence before dawn, when wisdom walks barefoot through marble corridors of time, where ancients took root, from Orpheus to Moses, from Babylon to Greece, each voice echoes one truth, all paths lead to peace. The cosmic egg still cracks, Phanes light still breaks through every human heart when consciousness awakes. It's the Agora Hour, sacred time to gather, where wisdom flows like water and all streams flow together, from many into one, from one into many. The game that spins the worlds, the dance that changes plenty into infinite possibility. 6 days, 6 kings, one spiral spinning high, from formless void to formed reality we fly, through Nyx's starlit wisdom to Gaia's fertile ground, through Kronos' measured motion to Zeus's lightning crown, to Dionysus' ecstasy, where spirit meets the flesh, where ancient tales get broken and woven fresh. Let the markets fill with voices, let the temples ring with song, where merchant meets philosopher and weakness becomes strong. In the space between our differences, truth unfolds its wings. In the clash of honest questions, new understanding springs. Genesis speaks Hebrew, while Orpheus sings in Greek, but under different tongues, the same mysteries speak, of light emerging from the void through sacred sound, of waters parting high and low, of holy ground, rising from the deep, of stars that mark the time, of creatures born of earth and clay sublime. It's the Agora Hour, sacred time to gather, where wisdom flows like water and all streams flow together, from many into one, from one into many. The game that spins the worlds, the dance that changes plenty into infinite possibility. So bring your truth to market, lay your wisdom bare, in the space between our stories, sacred moments flare, where Phanes meets Elohim, where Tiamat greets Eve, in the garden of our gathering, new worlds we conceive. It's the Agora Hour, time to play our part, in the cosmic game of many, flowing back to start. Remember, the mysteries aren't lost, they're living, in the spaces where we gather, in the questions we're giving to each other in trust, in the sacred now, when we remember how to wonder, remember how to see through different eyes, the same eternal light that dances through all stories, making all paths bright.